Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of GameSense Season 2. Really excited to have not one but two phenomenal guests on tonight. A couple of our regular hosts are traveling or otherwise occupied, so big thanks. We'll let them introduce themselves a little bit later. But also a big thanks to our sponsor, Symbiotic. They're a great supporter of what we do here and of First, and we really appreciate everything that they do to let us put on this awesome show. Um, Introduce the regulars that are with us tonight. I'm Evan Morrison. I'm going to be your host. A little bit of a throwback. Joining me tonight is last season's host, Steph Morrison, my wife. She's also handling all the behind the scenes stuff. So if she looks a little bit busy sometimes, that's why. Of course, Ty Tremblay.
How's it going, guys?
And then our two guests, we have Justin Ridley from 118 Robonauts and Tom Bottiglieri from 254 Cheesy Poofs. Justin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Justin Ridley, Robonauts. I've been with Robonauts for the last 11 years. I started first back in 1998, actually, as a high school student. I did my junior and senior year, and then I went to school at Michigan Tech, and I helped start Team 857 up there. Did that through school, and then when I came down, I started working at NASA at the Johnson Space Center in 2005, and started working with the Robonauts then.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Glad to have you on. And a little familiar face to some, Tom, one of our only returning guests. Why don't you say a bit about who you are for those who might not know?
So I'm Tom Bottiglieri. I'm a mentor on Team 254, the Cheesy Poofs, and I've been with them since like 2010 now. Did Team 195 from Southington, Connecticut in high school. Helps out with Team 125, the Neutrons, in college, and really happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, just a couple of things. Our show runs for about an hour, and then we'll take a short break and come back for about 20 to 30 minutes of live Q&A. If you're watching the recording, you won't get to see the Q&A, so it's watch us live next week, and you'll be able to see it. If you have a question for us anytime throughout the show, you can submit it via our GameSense chat bot in the Twitch chat by typing !Q followed by your question, or you can tweet at us at FRC GameSense, hashtag FRCGS, or you can email at us gamesense@frcgamesense.com. And with that, our standard disclaimer, we don't take ourselves too seriously. You shouldn't either. If you don't like something we say, go out and prove us wrong. With that, this evening we're going to be talking about the hot topic of can theft auto. Some people call it can burgling. Whatever it is, those center cans are really, really important, and we're going to talk about just how important they are. We're also going to talk about some of the highest scores that we've seen, actually the highest scores that we've seen in Recycle Rush so far, and week 4, the week that was, with some of the top performances to date. So with that, Tom, did you get much of a chance to watch, I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but to watch events last weekend, and what'd you see?
Yeah, we definitely, in the 254 lab, try to keep Blue Alliance Game Day open and have as many streams going as possible. But front and center was definitely the Waterloo Regional. And I'm sure most of the people watching this show have already watched, most of the matches or watched it live. But 11-14, man, they are the real deal. They pick up the totes really, really fast out of the landfill. They have the can. They can pick it up sideways from the ground. They drop them off real fast. They have a ramp. They just do everything. They teamed up with Team 2056, who was no slouch themselves. They were able to do 2-3 stacks a match with the cap and get the cans off the middle. And the two of them together, they had, through some weird scheduling snafu, had 2 qualification matches together. And I think in both of those, they were able to do over 200. Shot them right up in the rankings. They seeded number 1 and 2. 11-14 picked 2056. The rest is history. I think they shattered the previous world high score like 117 times or something like that. So that was pretty sweet. Also, we had a couple more teams doing pretty well. I watched the Tech Valley Regional a little bit because 195 was at it. There was a few good teams there that did really well. 118 competed at the Sacramento Regional along with Citrus Circuits and 971 and 1671. 118 managed to get together with 1678 and they won that event. Justin can probably talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, but a lot of really good performances last week.
Awesome. I also want to mention a couple of Midwest teams that had really strong showings at events that people may not have watched as much. They weren't necessarily premier events, but 2481, the Roboteers, they came out really, really strong early in the season and just blew out Rock City. And they're not slowing down. Amazingly high scores out of them at Central Illinois. And then in Wisconsin, Wave Robotics, they just revealed last week with this really crazy machine that does the 28-point solo auto and then can put up stacks of 6 with the 3 cans that they grab. So they actually weren't number 1 seed, but they captained their own alliance to the win. And just some great performances all around this weekend. Justin, as mentioned, you were at Sacramento, which, interestingly enough, for what has traditionally been one of the weaker regionals, was pretty competitive this year. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that went?
Yeah, I thought Sacramento was tough. I mean, we knew the circuits were going to be there in 971. I wasn't familiar with some of the other teams over there that ended up having really great robots. I would say kind of an opposite situation happened out there as far as scheduling, is that teams didn't really have a whole lot of help. We didn't get to play with any of the, after the rankings were done, we didn't play with any of the top 6 teams. Didn't play. None of the top 3 teams played with each other at all. So the scores were high out there, and I think they were high. A lot of teams were kind of flying solo in their matches and putting up high scores. The numbers weren't quite as high as Waterloo, but if you look at the OPR, the average OPR for the top 5, or you take the top 10 teams, is actually higher than Waterloo. So it was stiff competition out there.
Yeah, I want to say I think not everybody saw 1671 at I want to say Central Valley early on, but they were kind of quietly putting up a lot of points. They got burned by some fallen over stacks, didn't make it to finals, and
they were consistent.
They were really good.
A big thing. They were on our heels for number 1 seed the entire time, and it was because they were just doing the same thing in the human player every match. They were trying to get their 3 stacks. They would always get 2 stacks. Sometimes they'd get that 3rd with a can, needles in each of them. So they were definitely impressive. They were scary.
And even though they didn't make it to the finals and nab themselves a wild card, they did qualify for championship on the Chairman's. So congratulations to the Bird Brains, and looking for a good performance out of you guys at Champs.
Yeah, they took a bit of a gamble. 971, which machine, awesome. I'm really excited to see what they do at Silicon Valley. But they were working out some kinks. But they had the other fast can grab, and I think 1671. They picked him for that can grab, hoping they'd get a stack or 2 out of him as well. And then 971 kind of struggled making the stacks. But they got a lot of potential. I think 971's going to show up with something pretty good at Silicon Valley.
Yeah, Spartans had some reliability and consistency issues that they thought they'd had worked out by the end of Friday, and then Saturday just kind of everything fell apart for them. They were able to get it together for the quarters, but just couldn't quite hang on to make it to finals. It was really tight right there.
It's one of the most robotic machines I've seen this year.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'll see. We might be able to pull up some video of that later, but right now, Ty, you were at UNH for your second play.
Yeah, something really interesting happened at UNH is there wasn't necessarily that one team that absolutely dominated everybody else, or maybe 2 teams if you're in Canada. But the depth of field was insane. That you had to get 96 points or better to make it into the top 8 for a qualifying average, and then from quarterfinals on, you had to average over 110 even to move on. And finals were finals were decided by 1 point, 143 to 142. So while it wasn't necessarily putting up the 280 point scores of two powerhouse teams there, I think it was a good showing of how several, good solid teams can work together and put up consistent scores at a very competitive event throughout with a very big depth of field. So actually, speaking of that, I think that we should start talking about whether or not or how these scores are actually climbing, because we're starting to see, we were amazed last week, right? If you had an 86 qualifying average at in Utah, then it was the most competitive event that week, and you were number one at like 2 or 3 regionals. But here, 86, you didn't even get in the top 8 at some events. So I'd like to hear what you guys are thinking about why these scores are climbing so fast between week 3 and week 4.
I think people are getting good at the human player. I think you figure out how to do the human player loading, and you just do that every time. And there's just not. There's things that can go wrong, but there's not as many things that go wrong as we're going out in the landfill and trying to get toast in the landfill, and you get a noodle in your way, or your driver makes an error. Just there's more things that can go wrong out there. So just like we talked about 1671, they kind of got in that rhythm, and they were just doing the same thing over and over again. And I kind of saw that starting in week 3, and it looks like it definitely happened further in week 4.
Yeah, I mean, as the season progresses, you obviously have more time to work on your robots, kind of see what other people are doing, make those changes in unbag time or on your practice robot, or, build them up and test them off board. Back to 1671, we saw them at the Central Valley Regional, and they were able to stack really quickly, but they had some consistency issues, and it looks like they were able to, take that and run with it, make it better, and they looked awesome at Sacramento. So multiply that by the whole population of first teams, and you end up with much higher scores across the board.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially for this game. I think that we're seeing teams improve significantly event to event, and I would say the majority of that has to do with the fact that there aren't that many variables in play. With the divided field, so there's no defense. You come up with a strategy for your alliance, but some of these top robots, as Tom mentioned, 1671 is a good one. Any of the teams that will consistently go out there, they have a game plan. They go out and they do the same thing every match, and if that's enough to get them seated high, then that's all they need, right? They're not worried about whether their opponents are going to be able to pull some wicked defense on them or anything like that. So I think specifically within the framework of this game, we're seeing a lot larger jump than we normally would between event 1 and 2.
I went to my 3rd district in the Pacific Northwest this past weekend, and actually saw something really interesting. Everybody been talking about all the scores increasing and everything, and I was kind of expecting to see that after seeing it at my 2nd event. And I actually saw the opposite. Scores were a little bit lower. There were maybe the 3 or 4 top teams that had gone to all 3 of the events, along with 1318, the team I was with, and the high scores were actually lower. And I think a lot of it, from what I saw, was teams were pushing their robots to the limits and not knowing when they were going too far. 3663 had a massive failure after their practice matches. They completely destroyed a part on their robot, and it took them 2 more matches where they didn't even field their robot to get the machine shop to remake the part, because they'd been pushing their elevator to go faster to try and go for 3 stacks instead of the solid 2 stacks of 6 that they had been getting. So I think that's one thing that I started seeing, was robots are starting to break, and people are pushing them a little harder. And that's something to watch out for in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the districts. I mean, we've got 5 districts this year. Indiana joining us. And if you're not used to it, that's a lot of matches that you play, especially if you decide to go to a 3rd event. I think 125 is playing again this next weekend, the Neutrons. They competed week 1 at a regional, and they're like they did, I don't know how many, 7 events last year, something like that, if you include championships. It's just ridiculous, the amount of playtime that some of these machines get.
Yeah, they're
Um,
doing a regional in 3 districts, and then they're
and
going
the district
district
champs.
champs. Yep.
And, like,
And they qualified for championships.
and they
week
qualified
one,
for
so
champs.
they're
Yeah.
going. So that's a lot of matches to put on that robot. It's better
So I
than
know-
last year, but you're not getting destroyed by defense in every single match you play. So hopefully the district robots will be able to hold up to championships this year.
Yes, certainly nothing like last year, where if you didn't have your frame bashed in by the end of district champs, you weren't doing enough.
Even without defense, though, no bumpers can be scary. You're
Yeah.
driving around auto and you get a team coming at you accidentally in auto. I mean, we had a couple times where robots got ran into, and it definitely scares me every time knowing I got no bumpers protecting me.
Well, another place that that we're probably going to start seeing some interaction and probably some damage is as we kind of alluded to before, are going for those center cans, and so far there's only been one quote unquote battle, I think, in the final match, number 2 at Waterloo, where 2056 was able to steal the cans away from Dave. I want to say that's 3683. But there wasn't really any damage there. Dave's arm just flopped out, and that was that. But I expect, especially as we start getting closer and closer to these high-speed races, there's not a lot of weight there for beef. So on that topic, I think maybe we'll go ahead and show the looking forward video that we have this week, and move into the center can discussion, if we're ready for that.
You gotta give me 1 second.
All right, we're gonna stall for time while Stephanie gets that ready. I threw that on there, but I know. So Justin, you guys had done some cheesecake, and you were prepared for a finals matchup where you may have to go against 971, and they're
We're ready
fast.
to race. We went into Sacramento expecting some races. I expected races, around the country. I guess week 4. I just saw the Waterloo one here right before the show, so I'm excited to see what happens when we start racing.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is that there's typically maybe 1 or 2 fast, consistent can grabbers at every event, and they either tend to pair up or one of them doesn't make it to finals, and nobody's really battling for those. And honestly, why would you risk it if you can necessarily just go for the other 2? So it looks like we're ready. Go ahead and roll the looking forward video, and we'll be back in about a minute.
Increasingly, alliances are capable of scoring 4 or more sizable stacks, which creates a shortage of bins to place on them. And with that, the quest for the center step containers begins to intensify. Alliances that can score all 7 cans are an extreme exception currently, but getting our 4th or 5th is critical. Even later in the season, ensuring you're on an equal 5-can footing will be very important. While full-blown races are infrequent at this point, Alliance members capable of gaining access to the center containers at some point during the match are becoming a must-have for playoff contenders. As Recycle Rush progresses further, expect the demand for step containers to continue to grow, and the time they're available to shrink.
All right. Thanks again to Looking Forward for putting together a fantastic video. Always on point. So, Can Wars. They're just starting to appear, but I think they're here to stay. So, Justin, why don't you talk a little bit about the strategy that was going into Sacramento, and what you thought you might have to go up against?
We knew the circuits had at the time I guess we thought they had a 4-can grabber. They changed that to a 2-can grabber. It actually brings up kind of the point of how fast is fast in this race, in this war. We went into the season thinking, well, we got at least be better than a second. We got to get those cans off the step in a second. And then 3310 put that annoyingly sounded video out there that kind of threw the gauntlet down. And I'm sure Paul recognizes that he did this, but he told the world how fast was needed to be. we watched that video that night. We started making it faster. We knew we were going to play them in Dallas. So right now I see there's a class that's about, they're about a half a second, maybe a little bit faster than that. We time everything in high speed video at 240 frames, so we talk in frames. So like we're at about 80 frames. 3310 in Dallas, they were faster than everybody. So I think they're of the teams that we've seen in a class amongst themselves. But going into Dallas, we thought we just needed to be able to beat the circuits or play with the circuits. We didn't know about 971's can grabbing, so we went in with a little bit faster than what we had at Dallas, and that's kind of another question of, can teams, as the fastest a team shows, really the fastest they are. There's things that we can do with our robots to make things faster. Maybe it makes it riskier in that the chances of getting the cans go down a little bit. But if we're in a race where we know we absolutely need to win and we need to get below a certain speed, we can do some things to try to get that faster. We just may not get the cans. So, it's an interesting thing. Like I said, I'm excited to see some more races. We're definitely going to see races on at Worlds. I guess question for you guys: how many? I'm really curious about this. How many? We'll call them ultra fast grabbers. So the teams that are really racing. How many of those are going to be in each division?
Ooh. Based off of what we're seeing now, is 3310 going to make it to district or make it to Worlds?
They have one more shot to qualify at Hub City, but as of yet, they haven't made it out of quarters. So, that's an interesting point is, are all of them even going to qualify? 971 hasn't qualified yet. So, I don't know. But
no, I think we'll see. I say 2. I say we'll see 2. It's just a guess.
Per division.
But of those top tier, 2 per division, and it'll be most interesting to see what happens when it comes down to alliance selection. You're going to need those cans, but even if you have the cans, you're not going to get any points unless you can use them. So which do you go for? If these robots that have these incredibly fast can grabbers can't stack can't make 2 stacks of 6, do you hope they're still there on the way around, or do you pick them and then hope that you can compensate for that?
I think we're going to be surprised. I think there's going to be more than we expect, because I think there's a lot of teams that have not shown can grabbing as part of their arsenal that are going to come with can grabbing for the first time. And I think there's a lot of teams that maybe they're fast, maybe they're not super fast, and they're going to get a lot faster. And I think teams are holding things in their back pocket. I mean, 3310 publicly stated, they're making stuff faster, and they're not going to show it. And maybe they have to show it in their final regional to try to get that bid. But there's a lot of teams that have bids that, they're going to make improvements, and maybe they're not going to play those improvements in their last tournament if they don't think they need them.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I would say I think probably about and I kind of put them into 2 classes, with what I call the half-second barrier. I think we'll see a lot of can grabbers that come out that are right around the half-second mark or so, and I think beyond that we might see only a dozen that actually are able to consistently make it under that to the 0.25, 0.3 that we're seeing of these, pushing the limits of what's physically possible to do. So I don't know, Tom, what do you think about that? 254 didn't have one when they played at Central Valley. I'm sure that's going to change.
Maybe. We'll see. I'm probably more in line with what Ty's saying. I definitely think more teams will come out, for district champs or world champs and have the we call it a peacock on 254. They'll have the can grabbing device on there, but I'm not sure how many will be, past that half-second barrier. I think you maybe will have 2 to 3 per division. Some divisions will have none. Some divisions may have more. But I can tell you that the team who wins 3 off the step in finals in Einstein is going to win championships. So that's really all it comes down to, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ty.
I'd actually the question I have is, Justin, you brought up a point about how fast is fast. Now, are we talking about teams that get their can grabber, they acquire the can in less than 0.25 seconds, or are we talking about teams that are actually going to be able to move these cans in under 0.25 seconds? If you saw that video that we were just showing, 971 actually, their can grabber has their ability that as soon as they touch the top of their can, it starts yanking it off. They don't have to drive away, and I think that's going to prove to be a lot more faster than even if you have a 6-sim drive trying to accelerate your entire robot.
So that's true. Although if you look at 1671 there, they got those Lexan guards, and we've got some guards too. So when we talk about a race, we're usually talking about who's getting in the hole first. Like we say, if we get in the hole first, we got a guard over that hole, and no one's getting. They're not getting in the hole after us. Now, if teams are grabbing from the handle, that's a different story. I haven't seen a whole lot of that yet. But like in that race right there, 1678's left arm gets in that hole first, and I think that Lexan guard blocks 971 when they come in. Now, what exactly happens with all that energy when you got a little Lexan guard and this arm slamming down? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't stop 971 from getting in the hole. But it's when we talk about a race, we're talking about getting in the hole first.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring that up because I know from 971's perspective, they're designing their system to make the can unreachable within a particular period of time. That's why that can grabber is designed like that. But that being said, if they don't get in the hole first, it doesn't work. So they're putting all their chips in that pot of it will get there and it will get the can away faster than somebody else can get to it. And I don't know if they're really going to be able to achieve that mark.
I think we're going to see some things too with the cheesecakes.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
What happens when two robots do get in the hole at the same time, and there's a tug of war, or are those robots going to be locked out? No one really knows what's going to happen with that. And I know we've had some thoughts of, well, if we got to race, let's try to race with our cheesecake. That way, if we lose, if that robot gets lost, we lost the less effective stacking robot. We saw one race. We didn't see any tug of wars yet, and I think we might see some tug of wars.
I think you bring up a good point there about the cheesecake, about putting a mechanism, center can mechanism, on another robot that may be an extremely fast one. Do we think that those are actually going to be able to get to the speeds that the sort of purposely designed, within the robot itself are? If 118 built a version of theirs to put on another robot, do you think you're going to be able to get it tuned to that same speed? I don't know.
I think it's going to be close. I mean, you look at 1678. That our third robot in Sacramento. That was one of their extra can grabbers, and it was basically identical to what they had in their robot. I just don't think the action of tilting an arm into a can is that hard to do. That's why I think that we're going to see a lot more than maybe we expect at Champs.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about just getting the can grabber into that hole and blocking it off with your Lexan guard, then I don't think that's too hard. But once you factor in the timing of driving away with that as fast as you possibly can, I think that's where the cheesecakes starts to win out that are designed like 971s, where you fire a pneumatic piston or you retract an electric solenoid. So it's like one pneumatic solenoid of one spike, and bam, you've got two. So I think that there's going to be, especially if you've got 75 teams at championships, right? If you've got 75 teams, you can find a team in there that has pneumatics on their robot and has a place where you can bolt this thing on. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the cheesecake grabbers could be just as fast as the regular ones. There's nothing that different about them, right? You just kind of, especially now that you can carry in a whole assembly, right? You just carry it in, bolt it on, double stick tape it on, wire it up to a solenoid or something. You're done. So I think the top teams will have that. I think a handful of teams in every division will be ready for that part of the game. I think a lot of people won't be. I think a big part of scouting this year is going to be asking are teams willing and able to have their robot modified? What does their bomb look like? That kind of stuff is something that you've never really had to do in the past. But yeah, it's not that hard of a task to do, right? And you can do it pretty fast. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I definitely agree with Justin that there's definitely incentive to use your cheesecake device over your regular robot's can grabber. Just because if you do get hung up on that center step, you don't want to take out your biggest scoring robot, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the big decision, right? Is probably on Einstein. You're going to have 4 robots going for 4 cans, 2 apiece, and you're basically offering up the cheesecake as a sacrifice.
Yeah, the other thing that comes into play is where you line up. So I think everyone's kind of been building their can grabbers on grabbing from the flat ground, and when they move over to the scoring platform, the geometry changes a little bit when the robot has to be on that platform and they're tilted forward a little bit. Maybe that doesn't affect some teams. It definitely affected us a little bit. I think some teams just may not be thinking about that, or they just might not be as effective from the scoring platform side, which maybe that robot placement is going to be important as far as which team you're choosing to race and from which section.
So talking about robot placement, at the beginning of the season there was a whole bunch of hubbub about the blue side advantage in setup. So the setup rules indicate that red side places their robot first, then blue side, and then it alternates from there on. And the assumption was that that the blue side had an advantage because they would get to basically choose how they react. What are your thoughts on that? Is it actually an advantage now that we've seen how this stuff actually works, and is it going to come into play on Einstein?
It's an advantage if you're faster.
Right.
I think you saw Team Dave try to execute that exact strategy. They were pretty much outgunned in the finals at Waterloo. But if
were they really outgunned?
Yeah. But anyway, they had the foresight to see, like, if we put our robot out there and we beat 2056's Peacock, we have a chance of winning the match. Even if we can't put up all 5 things on our own, we have probably limited them to 3, maybe 4. And our win probability goes up. So, yeah, it's definitely an advantage. I don't see how it's not. But at the same time, you still have to win the race, right? So you could have all of the pre-match advantage you want, but if you can't go out there and grab the cans faster than them, it really doesn't mean anything. So,
I think I totally agree with Justin that a lot of teams may have overlooked how hard it is to set up on the platform side. I know it affects my team's robot when we set up on that side, and a little bit more because we actually try and set the containers down standing up, which is getting reasonably reliable without the platform in the way. But when the platform's there, it's really hard. But we also, our robot's long enough that we have to start partway on the platform, or and drive over it, and it's really difficult to actually. Definitely difficult to have one autonomous routine that can do both sides, and we didn't feel comfortable trying it in competition without really going through and testing that on the practice robot first.
Yeah, actually, it came into play at UNH where we had 138 had a toucan stealer, and then there was another team that I'm blanking on right now that also had 133 had a 1 can. So 133 goes down and they're on the blue side, and 138 comes out and sets their container down, and then 133 comes over and sets their robot down, and 138's like, "Oh no, quick, hurry!" And they all run out, and it's like Benny Hill, like da 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 da, and they're like picking up their robot and setting it down, and then 133 comes over and moves their robot, and then 138 moves that back to the other side. Frank Merrick was actually there, and Frank just comes over and just goes, "Whoa, guys, hold on a second, let's look at this." And it was actually, that was, the deciding factor was that blue gets the advantage. And then once they realized that, they decided that they were just going to cut their losses and guarantee that they were each going to get 2. 138 took their side, 133 took their side.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that a lot up until you get to really the highest levels of play, that most teams are going to be content, especially with the averages, right? With the averages coming into play until finals, most teams are going to be content to get 5 cans to work with and use those 5 and try and work whatever advantage they have, until we start getting.
I don't think you're racing. I don't think you're racing to the finals. I mean, in Dallas, we went up against 3310, and we walked over and said, "Hey, do we have to race right now? We'd rather not race." And they didn't want to race either. So it's scary. No one really knows what's going to happen when 2 hooks go in the hole and start pulling. So
it's risky, right? You're talking about. I mean, you could break a robot. You could end up with both robots entangled through the can for the entire match and out of commission. It's. You kind of want to avoid it until you have to in order to try and move on, which certainly puts the faster teams at the advantage, like Tom said. Basically, if you know you've got the faster one, you have the advantage. You have control.
And the thing is, I don't know how you ever know that.
Right.
I mean, you might know. You definitely know you're slower, but I don't know if you ever know you're faster. I think teams are holding things back, and teams can do things to maybe juice it just a tiny bit faster.
Well, speaking of speed, the next topic related to this is the FMS initialization delay, which has really never been a thought in anybody's mind of how this initialization sequence works until now, because we're talking about fractions of a second. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm going to level set, and then I'm going to pass it off. Tom, are you familiar with this topic? A little bit?
I'm a little bit familiar.
A little
with
bit.
it.
All right.
Yeah.
Justin?
Yeah, you going to tell me how the FMS really works?
I have no idea.
Are we going to speculate?
We are going to speculate based on the most reliable information sources I know. But my understanding, and I preface this with my understanding because I have no idea if I'm right or not, my understanding is that the way that robots initialize on the field or get enabled on the field is that they're running a polling loop, essentially. And they're asking their driver station, basically, if the driver station has been told to enable yet. And then eventually the driver station says, "Oh, yes, I was just told that you can enable now." And the robot enables. And the driver station is what's actually communicating directly with the field, with the FMS. And there's a whole bunch of variables in play. But the upshot is that if you've got 6 robots on the field and they're all polling at some rate, whether it's, a 50 millisecond or whatever, that even if every single driver station gets the initialization signal at the same time, unless all 6 robots are synchronized in their polling cycle, one of them is going to initialize before the others. And there can be a phase shift of, a significant amount of time with regards to 0.2, 0.3 second can grabbers. And this has been noticed, I think, twice now. I think there was some video from Dallas that somebody looked at and saw with 3310 and with 118, and video from Sacramento. So the question is, we don't know if there's any way that this can be circumvented. Is this going to decide matches on Einstein? When you get up to that level, are teams so close that this initialization out of sync could decide who gets the cans and who doesn't?
Yeah, I will say that in Dallas we had high speed video of 2848, I believe it was, against 3310. 2848 was definitely slower. They weren't going to get there first, but they
with their
started
4-can?
With their 4-can, yeah. They started moving. I'm talking frames again. This is 240 frames per second. They started moving 50 full frames before 3310. We showed that to the 3310 guys, and they said they could account for for maybe half of that and just the way that their system was working, but the other half they couldn't. So that's 25 frames out of 240, whatever that math works out to. That's significant when you say 3310's only taking 50 frames to get to the can. So I don't know. The cheap Delphi thread, to me, seemed like a lot of speculation. Nobody stated exactly how it works. And if there is a initialization delay, like who goes first? Does the blue side go first? Is it whoever connects first? I don't know.
I hope it's not whoever connects first, because then it's just they're sitting there above their buttons and like, no, you do it. No, you push the button.
That was some of the further speculation on Chief was that it could have to do with who connects first.
Well, one of the big calls I saw on Chief Delphi was just for some better documentation of how this whole thing actually works, because it's a big black box.
Somebody knows. Somebody out there knows.
Somebody has to, right?
Somebody has half the
maybe
picture.
They're not saying because they know how upset people are going to be when we all figure it out.
Well, and the thing is, like, there's timing delays like we had with the hot goal late last year, and then there's timing delays on the order of milliseconds that nobody in their right mind designing their system for previous, viewing previous FRC games would ever expect could actually impact on the level that we might see here. And even when the game was released, I don't think anybody really would have expected that until we started seeing, it's actually physically possible to pull these cans off in 0.2 seconds. So if you're talking a 50 millisecond delay here, right, that's the difference. That's a quarter of the time that this mechanism is moving. Could make or break it. We don't know, so hopefully we'll find out some info. Yeah, right? You just close your eyes and hope that it goes right for you, and pray to RN Jesus.
Yeah. The main thing I want to add about that is for people, keeping score at home. If you're at your event and you think that there is an issue, it's really hard to assert that your robot was enabled or disabled, before or after the other one, right? Like last year with the hot goal, you'd see the robot moving, you'd count 30 frames, and then the light would turn on. Like very clearly, robot was enabled, right? But you don't know what's going on, because there's about, the packet has to go from the FMS to your computer, then your computer has to send it to the robot, and then your robot has to realize it's enabled, and then your motors have to spool up, or your valve has to open, so please keep it to yourself. Don't go complaining to the referee that the FMS broke your robot or something like that, because it probably didn't. So
yeah, and that's a good point, right? That the only evidence, quote unquote, that we have here is high-speed video of robots moving after the field light goes green and when they actually start moving. And as Tom points out, there's any number of variables that goes into when a robot actually starts moving, or at least visibly starts moving on video, as compared to when it receives the enable packet. And there really isn't any good way within the confines of the system at competition to get any better than that, right? You have to make some assumptions, and when we're talking 2-3 frames, that could be the difference between somebody has a motor, a more powerful motor on a lighter weight system, so the acceleration time is less than, Joe team over here that's got a huge pneumatic piston that they're opening the solenoid valve at the same time that the motor starts moving, but the piston hasn't built up enough force to get their system moving for, a 0.1 seconds. So we don't know. We don't really know how big of a problem this is.
Yeah, just convince all the robots at your event to put little LEDs on the robot that turn on when it's enabled, and then you can get to the bottom of this pretty quickly.
Yeah. So unless we've got anything else, we're getting to winding down. So maybe we should take a look at what's ahead next week.
Yeah, next week's going to be interesting, man. We've got basically, I think if you summed up the number of miles traveled to get to a regional, then Hawaii would beat you by far. We've got teams coming from everywhere to go to Hawaii.
It'd be a race for Australia. I think they had a whole bunch of teams from China and stuff, but
yeah, China's not that far from Australia. I mean, what? We've got Mort heading over there. We've got
610 is going.
610 is going. So that's 3. That's wow, that's a lot. Not to mention, all of a sudden we've got 368 popping up. They decided to relax, take their time, mosey on over to a regional when they felt like it.
368 Kikamana is playing week 5 and week 6 this year. They're playing Hawaii and Silicon Valley, and so it's certainly talk about cutting it down to the wire. But they're a phenomenal team, and I'm sure they're going to have something really good for us. I believe also 3132 Thunder Down Under is coming from Hawaii. They're doing a home and home with 359. They were finalists, number 1 pick at Australia, and finalists losing to 359 in a very tight finals match 3. So they're looking to come back and get themselves a blue ribbon at Hawaii. Should be fun.
I'm pumped to see Tikamana.
Yeah, should be good.
Yeah, rumor has it they're like 11-14, but with more wheels.
I believe I've confirmed via a picture posted on Facebook that they have the Swerve Drive again, and that was pretty phenomenal last year. So yeah, really excited to see what they come out with. But 368's not the only team playing next weekend. We've also got a couple of districts wrapping up. Indiana, as far as I can tell, is done. They've got a week off before the district champs. They're locked in. If I'm wrong, somebody tell me, please. But what else we got?
1771's back, guys.
Yep.
The greatest team in the history of all time with their incredible 2008 Suction Cup.
That was phenomenal. I love
that. So for those of you that didn't know, they had this massive Suction Cup, and this is what a Suction Cup looks like. And it was just mounted on an arm, and it would go up and down, and it would grab the ball. And they actually shot the ball by pushing against the center of the ball inside their suction cup so hard that the deformation of the ball was what gave them the friction for it, or the force in order to shoot it over. But they were gone for a couple of years, maybe 1 year, but they're back.
2 or 3.
And all we've seen of them this year is a couple of things of cardboard. So I'm excited to see what 1771 comes up with at the Peachtree Regional.
Very cool.
I'm excited.
Justin. Oh yeah. What events are you going to be watching?
Vegas.
Vegas. There we go.
See my friends from up in Greenville. The last few weeks, I think everyone's been drooling over 11-14, and rightly so. I've been drooling. They're amazing. I think we kind of forgot how great 148 was and is going to be. They came out of the box at a week 1 regional, putting up three stacks, sometimes more, in their first practice matches. They had almost no driver practice, no time to get that robot tuned up. In the last few weeks, I know they've got a better auton. They're going to get the cans right where they want them, which was a big hindrance for them in Dallas. I expect them to really blow some minds at Vegas this weekend. And they were 987. They paired with them in Dallas. They teamed up good. 987 to me looked like 11-14. I mean, they were grabbing totes out of the landfill really fast, not quite as fast as 11-14, but again, that was week 1. Week 1 regionals are really hard, and they also came out of the box, in their first practice match doing really well. So I expect both those guys to be pretty awesome.
Definitely. Tom, who are you looking at this week?
All right, I got a couple shout outs I want to do here. The first one I want to talk about is Team 1296, the Full Metal Jackets. They're going to the Oklahoma Regional. They last competed, I think, at Alamo. I think they won there. And they're another one of those 148 style of robots where they have the stacking machine on the wall. Then their other robot is tethered to it. It goes and it grabs the can, it picks up the stack, it drops it. They're hoping to be able to do 5 stacks in a match, which I think is crazy. And they may also have a ramp tethered to them as well for their partners. So we'll see how that works out. Also, shout out to Team 195. They're competing in the Hartford District event this weekend. They just won last weekend at the New York Tech Valley Regional. Their first district event, they didn't do so well. They completely redesigned parts of the robot. They came out to their next regional and won it. So I assume they'll be going just as well as they were last week, and I expect them to do really, really well this week. Last shout out, Team 1323, one of my favorite teams in first, Madtown Robotics. They're competing at the Ventura Regional this weekend in California. And best of luck to them. We like to partner with them. We like to play with them, and best of luck to them.
Sweet. Ty, who are you looking at?
All right, 95 is heading down for their third. They did a late registration for Hartford, and they're looking to have their pure. They're basically, they can make 2 stacks of 2, and I think they can pick up other stacks. I don't think they can make anything taller than a stack of 2 themselves, but they're purely a capping robot. And one thing that we're starting to see in New England specifically is the stackers and the cappers. There aren't really that many teams that go around and grab a container and build a stack underneath it. There's a lot. The Winning Alliance at UNH actually just went over and they placed their stacks, and they had one robot whose entire job was to place caps on top of that. And then speaking of cans, 190 is currently flying over there. Is flying over to the Pacific Northwest to Philomath, which is why Francis cannot be with us today. He was going to do the show from the plane, but the Alaska Airlines specifically said that they don't allow Skype. So we're working with Alaska Airlines. We're restructuring our contract there. But 190 is looking to turn some heads when they show up. They've got some pretty amazing things in the pipeline, and they'll be using Philomath to both work with the Pacific Northwest teams and to tune what should be a very 190 device that they've got worked on.
Yep. Steph, you actually get to do shoutouts this week.
Yeah. I like the way you put that, Ty. A very 190 device.
Yeah, I mean, it's either going to work phenomenally, or it's going to break, or it's going to be illegal.
Yeah, it'll be interesting anyway, though.
Yeah.
That's. Yeah. Well, I wanted to shout out to 368. They're one of my favorite teams. But Evan already did that, and he will do it again. So, Team 330, another one of my favorite teams. I am just intrigued by their robot this year. It's very interesting. Not a robot I expected to see with the 3-container arm thing. And they won the LA Regional, and they're going to the Ventura Regional this weekend. And I think we'll see good things from them again.
Yeah, I'd say I wouldn't necessarily say they won the LA Regional. I think they crushed the LA Regional.
Yeah.
They pretty much asserted their dominance from the beginning, and 973, the gray bots at the end there, once they got the kinks worked out, were really smooth, but 330 pretty much stole the show. So a lot more teams gunning for them at Ventura. Be really interesting. Well, I got 3 shout-outs tonight. We already talked about Kikamana 368, so I'm kind of going to gloss over them, but really, really excited to see what they bring to the table this year. 1619, Up a Creek Robotics came out at Utah at the event that nobody watched but was apparently amazing, and partnered up with 624 from Texas and won that event. They're playing Colorado this weekend, and last but not least, 67 Hot. They showed up earlier this season with maybe a little bit of a slow start from what a lot of people were expecting. They were able to do 2 stacks of 5 relatively consistently by the end, but I know that they've been doing a lot of work since then. We haven't seen them in a while, so I'm excited to see the kind of upgrades that they've made. And,
yeah,
Hot's going to get a lot better. They were good, and they're going to get really.
67 was one of those teams that, much like 33 in Michigan, where they didn't have a toucan grabber system. but they did have a device that could go and grab them in teleop, which is an interesting approach. I think it was smart because, they let everybody else just do all the engineering trials and tribulations, and now they'll just, look at what everybody came up with and then make it better like they always do.
Yep. All right. Well, unless anybody has anything else to add.
It's a 9-hour flight from Hong Kong to Sydney and an 11-hour flight from Honolulu to St. Louis. So
there we go. There's your fun fact of the day, courtesy of Tombot here. That pretty much wraps up our show tonight. Don't forget that we are going to be coming back in just a few minutes to do about 30 minutes of Q&A with our wonderful guests here. So stick around, and you can submit your questions via the links at the bottom of the screen in the Twitch chat, !Q, and type your question. You can tweet at us at FRC GameSense with the hashtag FRCGS, or email us gamesense@frcgamesense.com. And with that, a big thank you to Justin and Tom for coming on. Tom was messaged by us about probably less than 24 hours ago going, oh crap, can you come help out? Because unfortunately something came up with Naveed and he was not able to make it tonight. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. You guys are doing something really cool with the show, and it was fun to be a part of it for a night. Thanks a lot.
Really appreciate that. Yeah, and thanks to everybody who's watching. Stay tuned, and we'll be back in just a minute. Good night, folks.
Strap.